Welcome. Good to see everyone here. Thank you. Thanks to the support staff. They've been super helpful. And to Mike and Richard already this morning. They have set up the perfect slam dunk for me here, talking about enabling a high-quality audio pipeline. As Richard mentioned, I do tend to lean pretty heavily on the side of technical sound design, but coming up with this talk, I found that I really didn't want to talk about technical sound design. I wanted to talk about communication. And this is a big thing, no matter what discipline you are or what game you're making, the fundamental exchange between you and your collaborators is how you communicate and the ways that you communicate together. My daughter said that this was a stale meme, but I thought it was pretty ironic because if you've heard this guy talk, he's very confusing. But you shouldn't be, because communication is not just speaking. It's multidirectional. It's between all the people. It's a skill that needs to be practiced. And it's audible and visual. Communication is contextual, right? As we're talking about things, we bring our own experience to these conversations. And in my opinion, it is critical to the quality for your game. Whether you're on the developer side or the game audio side. We saw a show of hands in the last talk. Who here is on the developer side of things? We have a few on the audio side. Things to learn in this presentation for you as well, I hope. So we're going to talk about a few things that I think contribute to the quality of game audio and the quality of development between creatives. The first thing is establishing vocabulary, the words that we use to communicate. The second thing is building trust. How do you find that place where you're able to share your creative output and support someone else's? And to me, the fundamental there is trust. Listening. I think a lot of the audio folks in here take it for granted that we have highly tuned ears and we can quickly spot the difference between different, ephemeral audios floating in space. And then visibility, which is ironic because game audio is not visible, right? So what are we talking about? Jumping right in, we're talking about establishing vocabulary. As I mentioned, words, they have these contextual definitions. We kind of all bring our experience to words, or when someone says a word, we have these feelings about these words. And so one of the things that really helps in the context of a creative relationship is establishing a shared dictionary, figuring out and coming together with a shared understanding of what words mean. I had a really interesting situation happen where I was trying to convey the idea of spatialization to a bunch of folks who were like coming from the film world thinking, what? In this new paradigm of VR. And it was fascinating because this is a word that inherently I understand as part of games, but they didn't quite get it, and we had, several conversations around the idea of what spatialization actually is. Not the crazy algorithmic nuts and bolts of it, but just what it means to someone walking around in the world to hear positional sound in the world. And so this was an example where I was trying to establish a common language as we worked together to try and build this virtual world in a way that made sense. And a lot of times, starting out with a developer, you're in a place where you're exploring these ideas of what the developer intention is and or what your intention as an artist are. And so a lot of times that language starts out as emotions and aspirations. And then eventually you get towards understanding things like spatialization. You can throw that around in the room and, people can get on the same page with it. Let's make this sound more spatial right now. We need to put it in the space. And that's the danger, right, is that techno jargon can be niche. Like already today, whole bunch of words getting thrown around. And I get it, right? These are words that we use every day that come with an inherent meaning. As audio professionals, we know what reverb is and does. We know what, sample rate is and how to deliver a wave file, right? I mean, how did the wave file get to become the standard exchange of sound file, right? Isn't it an AIF file or a SND file or, any other kind of audio format? No, we've kind of come to this place where we have this shared understanding of what it is. But these are words that not everyone they don't all know them. And so being mindful of that. And then it's hard to see at the bottom, but, be sensitive to acronyms that you use. Gender pronouns, talking over and cutting people off. Ignore these suggestions at the risk of losing trust with folks in your conversations, because it can very quickly put someone off if you don't have the right context in what you're speaking. So try to find that common ground early. Try to find it as quickly as possible with people. Here was an interesting picture I saw that Bob Katz posted. And again, it just kind of talks about the frequency spectrum and different words that people use down at to describe low bass sounds as being punchy or slam or boomy. And then, up in the top end of the frequency spectrum, we have these airy or bright sounds. And again, these are all words that we use to describe sound and kind of are comfortable with. So finding where those words are between the people that you're collaborating with is going to end up being of value early on. So 3 ways to establish vocabulary. When a collaborator uses a word to describe their intention, pause. Ask them to define what it means to them. This explosion is going to be so awesome. Okay, what does awesome mean to you? Like, maybe we have that shared experience together. Let's find out. And then use a contextual story to define your intention. Oh, actually, I found the sound of the waterfall to be awesome. So your explosion is going to sound like as awesome as that waterfall felt to me. Yeah, go for it. Totally. Okay. And then don't be afraid to use visual examples to convey sound, audio, and music. Draw pictures. It's going to be like this. Or use photos. Has anyone noticed? Hand gestures. Yeah, I do a lot of that. And then memes, right? Because why not? And I think that part of this establishing the vocabulary is leading to trust, right? Because ultimately you're going to succeed or fail based on whether you trust the developer to do the right thing with your audio and whether they trust you to do the right thing for their game. So building trust is a fundamental of that success, regardless of who's getting paid, because it's a two-way street to get good work and to be compensated for that good work. And for the developers in the room, trust your collaborators to do quality work. And that goes the other direction as well. Trust that the developer has the best intentions for your audio output, right? At the end of the day, you have to feel like everyone is working towards the same goal. And this is the kind of thing that you really get on the same page with by trusting the people that you're working with. Here are a couple suggestions for ways to build trust with a collaborator. As Mike mentioned earlier in his talk, give understandable feedback. And when you do give it promptly, within the time frame that makes sense to everything. Use identified vocabulary, as we've already discussed, and be sensitive, right? I was talking to Steve earlier this morning about how, in communicating, you need not only be critical of folks, but also measure that with sensitivity to kind of cultivate the artistic, right? You have to simultaneously give feedback that's constructive and also kind of honor the creativity that's being delivered. Set good expectations. Hold people accountable. Be realistic. Encourage honesty in both directions, right? If you say you have a milestone on Friday, does that really mean Monday? Be clear, right? And if it is Friday, make sure that your collaborators are delivering on Friday, and don't make it a habit of breaking that trust, because it will contribute to their feelings about the person that you are. Let go of your expectations. This is as much for developers as it is for audio designers. Once you've created a sound, it has legs and does its thing. On the same token, on the other side, as a developer, you may have expectations about what something would sound like, but the reason that you've taken on an audio collaborator is to encourage their creativity as well and cultivate their expression. So be ready to not know the answer to an audio question that comes up, and instead empower your collaborator to be the expert in that situation. Speaking of experts, listen. I kicked off by saying, for the sound folks in the room, we're all very tuned to the sound of things in the world. But this is an unseen art. It requires a different mode of reception for folks who aren't tuned into it. Sure, you got the Spotify cranking and you're playing games all the time and using your ears while you're doing that. And if you are, then actively listening, then you're a step ahead of some folks. But taking the time to understand what you're hearing is going to be a critical component to making a game sound great and making quality audio for it. So listening together with your collaborators in context. Are you making a game on a phone? You should probably try listening to it on that phone, even if you're both wired into a set of headphones, right? Give your experience context and leverage the expertise of this professional that you're collaborating with. What is the audio equivalent of a screenshot? There really isn't one, because sound happens in time, right? It is this thing, it flows from the speakers, and you cannot capture it in the way that you can convey something with a screenshot. Sure, you can get the output of it and play it back, but without that context of the game, it loses its power in a lot of ways, or it requires an extreme amount of understanding to spot the difference. So, fundamentally, know your game and either know what you want, be able to communicate what you want, or trust the sound person that you're collaborating with. They are the expert. So let's get visible, not physical. When you bring a collaborator on board, again, part of the success and part of the quality of your production is going to come from making them part of the team. Even if they're sitting in a studio down in LA, or in their closet at their parents' house, making them feel like they're part of a team and have the ability to interface with people is going to really bring them into the experience and give them what they need. Have video calls, right? Regular updates at the beginning of a project and throughout. Give them what they need visually to be able to create the sound for the experience that you're building. The more often that you give them concept art, in-game videos, design documents, geez, maps and lore, just whatever you got, throw it at these people. If they have the time, they will consume it and use it, and you want to inspire them. You want to feed them with as much of your passion as you can in order to get what they have to give. The value of visibility, don't measure other people's time by your own. Do they really have time to read the lore of this game that I'm making? No, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Don't waste people's time. Don't send them the esoteric design document that is unreadable by humans. But definitely don't assume that they won't dig into it. It might just be the thing that inspires them to add that extra piece that makes your game's audio great. Encourage them to participate. Seek contributions from them for your team demos if you're doing weekly stand-ups. Close the loop of authoring. If they give you sounds, make sure that they hear those sounds back in the game in context. If they're not working in your pipeline, find a way to close that loop. And with small teams, every email counts. If they can be part of that group, they will feel part of it and they will have that investment. Quick side note, game audio, more than just music. Y'all know this though, that's not even a surprise. I didn't need to say it. A brief slide on technical stuff, because I said that I wasn't going to get technical, but here's just a few things that I think could help enable quality in your games. Front load your technology. Early, better. Everyone always says it, but as soon as you can get sound on board, you're going to have this call and response that it becomes really valuable. Build a pipeline from sound file to game. Whatever it takes to get a wave file playing back in the game, make sure you understand that as a developer. And if you don't, leverage your expert who can help you find that path. Audio middleware, it's huge, right? Right now, folks are jumping right onto things like Unity, Unreal, like they're the best thing since sliced bread. And in the same way, audio middleware serves that purpose as well, to help enable your audio team to do quality work that serves the game and supports it. Aim for frictionless iteration. If they can get a sound in and hear it in the game as fast as possible, with little to no work, okay, there's always work. But the faster the better, right? Iteration, I think we all know, is the key to game development, because until things are in and working, you just don't know. Define your budgets. It's surprising sometimes that we have to say this, but really understand the context of what you're trying to deliver and what your budget is for that technically with RAM, CPU, hard disk space, or download size. And if you can, offload everything, right? Systems design, implementation, source control, auditioning, optimization. These are all things that an experienced audio professional and even an inexperienced audio professional can take on and take off your plate when it comes to audio for your game, right? There's just huge opportunities there to allow the game developer to focus on making the game and enable the audio professional to deliver quality audio for it. So, last thing on quality. If one aspect of the game is bad or different, all the other disciplines measured against that low bar, right? If voice acting is terrible, people are going to think the story is not great, right? If textures are too shiny and your hyper-realistic corridor crawler, your realism is going to suffer, right? If music doesn't fit the interaction, gameplay could suffer. People might feel that it's not as well scored as it could be. And if controls are laggy, the feeling of the game suffers. I think these are things that we understand, but ultimately that low bar is what your game will be measured against. So don't count audio out as something that's not important. It is as important as everything else. The opposite is true, right? Sometimes good audio can allow people to overlook chunky physics. Just a lot of potential there in the other direction as well. So again, in my opinion, enabling a high-quality audio pipeline starts with building vocabulary, building trust, listening well and understanding what you're hearing, and elevating the visibility of audio, this unseen thing that happens in your game. It's absolutely critical to the quality of your game. Thanks so much.